Session 3, Trauma-Informed Practice. In the previous session, we introduced the concept of trauma, what it is, how it impacts on people, and how it is especially common for people with multiple and complex needs to have experienced trauma. In this session, we are going to think about how we can better respond to people with MCN who use our services by working in a way that accounts for trauma. This is known as trauma-informed practice. Whose responsibility? Before we get into unpacking trauma-informed practice, we might be wondering why it is our responsibility to worry about this. After all, doesn't someone who has complex problems need to see a doctor or a specialist? In one sense, this is correct. People who have experienced trauma would ideally receive professional support from someone who specialises in understanding trauma. Unfortunately, people with MCN can find it hard to access and engage with professional support, and sometimes the support that is available is very limited. People with MCN who struggle with substance misuse are often asked to reduce or resolve drug or alcohol use before having access to formal treatment and support for trauma and mental health issues. For many, this is a very difficult thing to do because the substance use is a way of coping with their mental health problems and traumatic feelings. Therefore, people with MCN may not be receiving the specialist help they need, but will nevertheless depend on services such as temporary housing, hostels, job centres, or citizens' advice, where the staff are not always confident in knowing how best to support them. While we do not expect everyone working in these client-facing services to become trauma experts or give out medical advice, we can all make some adjustments to the way we work with people with MCN and see better outcomes for them. Trauma-informed practice is a way of working that anyone in any service can adopt. You don't need to be a specialist. Despite the complexity of trauma, there are some quite simple steps we can take to improve the way we support people with MCN. So what does trauma-informed practice involve? We can break it down into 4 R's. Number 1, realise the wide impact of trauma and the paths for recovery. Number 2, recognise the symptoms of trauma. Number 3, reduce re-traumatisation. Number 4, respond through policy, procedure and practice. In the previous sessions we have been doing stages 1 and 2, realising about the prevalence and wide-ranging impact of trauma, and we also spoke about recognising its symptoms. Once we start to see that many of the people who use our services have experienced trauma, their behaviour may make more sense to us, and it is easier for us to be understanding and empathetic. The third R is reduce or resist re-traumatisation. In the previous session, we discussed how traumatised people are often in a constant state of high alert. Our optimal state under normal conditions is when we can regulate our emotions and stay calm and in control. However, one expert puts it like this: when traumatised people are presented with images, sounds or thoughts related to their particular experience, the amygdala reacts with alarm. Activation of this fear centre triggers the cascade of stress hormones and nerve impulses that drive up blood pressure, heart rate and oxygen intake, preparing the body for fight or flight. With this in mind, when we are working or running services, we need to consider that what might seem harmless or even helpful to us could be experienced as re-traumatising by someone who has experienced trauma. We might have a waiting room that is very busy and noisy, with too many people crowded in that makes someone feel trapped. We might not have clear signs up and no one to welcome clients, so a person coming in may not know where to go or what is expected of them. This can make someone feel unsafe because they don't know what's going to happen to them. It could be something like being alone in an interview room with a staff member of the opposite sex. For a woman who has experienced repeated domestic violence, this might feel very threatening. Reducing re traumatisation will look different in each setting, and we can't always know what might impact on someone, but we can still aim to reduce situations and interactions that could trigger a traumatic memory or response. We need to consider how we can ensure clients' physical and emotional safety, create an atmosphere that is hospitable, engaging, and supportive from the outset, avoid practices that may be physically intrusive, avoid confrontations that may make someone feel humiliated or shamed, which could trigger trauma-related responses of avoidance, withdrawal, depression, or rage. We all want to feel safe, welcomed, and not humiliated or threatened when we use public services, but we might be able to brush off a negative experience or just put up with it. People with MCM who have experienced trauma may not be able to just brush it off because it may activate traumatic feelings and thoughts. Trauma-informed practice involves us as workers and services considering what we can do to minimise the chances of this happening to our clients. The fourth R is respond through policy, procedure and practice. Responding means making positive changes to the way we work and run our services that are trauma-informed. It requires making changes to our policies and procedures, including providing training and support for staff. And it also involves us as individuals thinking about the way we view and treat people and respond to their situations. Responding in a trauma-informed way should be guided by these 5 principles: safety, transparency and trust, collaboration, choice, and voice. Whenever we make a decision about how our service runs, how the building is laid out, or how we treat individual clients, we can refer to these principles for guidance. Safety. Ask questions such as, is the environment safe, predictable, and calm? Do we keep making the client open up and have to retell their painful story in order to access support? Are we quick to threaten eviction or bar people from our services? Does someone have to share bathroom facilities with strangers? Transparency and trust. Does the way of working help me build trust with this individual? For example, being reliable, keeping appointments and communicating early. Do I speak to customers in a respectful, understanding way that helps build trust? Am I clear about what I can and cannot do? Are they kept informed about the processes that affect them? Collaboration. Is the work collaborative? That is, am I doing something to someone, or are we doing something together? Are we working on the client's goals or telling them what they should do? Do we try to instill confidence and belief in a client that they can achieve their goals? Working together gives people a chance to grow and have control over their situation, build skills and build on their strengths. Choice. Do we give our customers a choice about meeting times, places and gender-specific service, such as housing, or is it a one-size-fits-all approach? Do we make people sort out one problem before we will help them address another? Voice. Do we listen to our clients carefully and try to understand what they want and need? Do we take their concerns or complaints seriously? Do we help our clients to have the information they need in a clearly understandable way so that they are empowered to make informed decisions and have control over their lives? When we think back to the previous session where we discussed the impact of trauma, we recall that traumatic events are characterised by fear, helplessness, a loss of control, and often a breach of trust by someone in a position of care or responsibility. If we run services in which people are made to feel unsafe, not listened to, coerced, controlled, and disempowered, we will repeat and compound the experience of trauma. And it should be of no surprise if people either disengage from our support or become frustrated, angry, and at times confrontational. If we try to apply these principles, it should mean that clients feel safe, empowered, valued, and respected, and they are more likely to have better outcomes when using services. Making decisions about our services, policies, and practices needn't involve guesswork. If we want to get a better understanding of what we can do to make our services more trauma informed, it is important that we actively seek the perspective of people with the lived experience of multiple and complex needs and of using our services. We won't explore this in detail here, but Fulfilling Lives have produced resources to help services carry out service user assessments. The links to these is in the description below. We have said in the previous sessions that supporting people with MCN who have experienced trauma can be challenging. We may find ourselves exposed to accounts of the traumatic experiences of our clients on a regular basis. We may also occasionally witness or encounter aggressive and threatening behaviour, which can be upsetting and potentially traumatising. When we care about the well-being of our clients, it can be hard to hear of their struggles. It can also be frustrating if their engagement is inconsistent, and we can find ourselves becoming jaded as our attempts to help seem to make little impact on people and their choices. Added to this, we may be facing personal challenges and not be feeling resilient in ourselves to support other people. Working in a trauma-informed way involves being aware of these challenges and the potential impacts on our well-being and being informed about the risk of vicarious trauma. It means creating workspaces that are safe for both clients and staff. Services do need to have a plan for how to manage challenging behaviour from clients and be clear and consistent about what behaviour is appropriate. Being trauma-informed does not mean excusing or just enduring inappropriate behaviours, but it does involve rethinking our responses to them. There are no easy answers to managing challenging behaviour, and it will look different in different settings. However, we should avoid responding to challenging behaviour in a way that makes people feel threatened, humiliated, and that they have no chance to explain themselves, reflect on what has happened, or put things right. It is easy to jump to barring or evicting people, but these are very strong measures and shouldn't be our knee-jerk response. There may be many other options we can consider to maintain safety and boundaries while still being supportive. It will start with trying to understand why someone may have behaved the way they did, possibly from a place of trauma. As employers, being trauma-informed involves ensuring that staff are well trained, have regular supervision and opportunity to voice concerns and access support. We want to encourage good time management and boundaries and taking annual leave at healthy intervals. Supporting challenging clients should be a shared responsibility, and we want to encourage our staff to hand over and work together. We may also want to explore having reflective practice spaces, and it is vital that we have opportunities to debrief following challenging or traumatic situations. As with our clients, it is important to normalise and validate our staff's experiences. If staff feel that their concerns and stresses are dismissed or trivialised, it can have disastrous effects on their well-being. As staff, we also have a responsibility to care for ourselves and look out for our colleagues. There are plenty of resources with practical advice, tools and techniques that promote personal well-being and resilience. Self-care involves making use of the training and support that's available, being proactive about seeking support if we are struggling with something, asking questions if we don't understand, and being honest about the things we find challenging. From time to time, we may need to seek out professional support, such as counselling, if we are exposed to a lot of client trauma in our work. Lastly, maintaining good professional boundaries, both individually and with consistency across the staff team, is part of our own self-care and part of trauma-informed practice. We explore this in further detail in the next session.
Wow. You couldn't count them, I think. I think there's so many benefits to it that yeah, I really don't think you could count them. Specifically, I'd say there's a sense of clarity, if that makes sense. Things feel really clear, really open, very honest. You tend to know what's happening at all times, which is really, really important, or at least it was for me. Just having that open communication. It also feels more cooperative, like people are working with me rather than just for me or because of me, which is really, really good. Another really important thing, I think, is that you can kind of see your progress, where you're at all points of the journey. You really feel more involved with the whole process, and communication is just phenomenally better. It just feels so much more easy to talk about things, and you don't worry about upsetting people as much, especially when talking about past lived experience. It feels like a more safer environment. You feel like you're less worried about being upset or upsetting others. I think the biggest one is retelling your story, having to keep going through it again and again and again. Not just with different services, but sometimes you often have a new worker come along. You'll be with a service for a while, you may lose your peer mentor or your support worker, and have someone else come in and you've got to go through the whole rigmarole all over again. It's exhausting, and then you kind of feel like you're having to go back every single month to kind of do it again. That for me was one of the most exhausting things. I think environment plays a huge part. The environments we're in can really bring back memories. I struggled a lot when I moved from the West Midlands down to the South Coast, because the similarities in a lot of the services, some things are universal across the country. All job centres seem to look the same, most councils look the same, and just re-entering those environments when you've had such a negative experience in the past can just bring up so much that was there before. Political answer, no. I don't think systems and services currently do, but I do feel it's talked about a lot more now. That it seems to that trauma's more, that there's a lot more knowledge and understanding of trauma. I have seen really great examples from individuals within services, especially the job centre. From my own personal effect, I met an amazing advisor that really had such a good understanding and approach. She kind of changed my whole journey, helped me identify where my needs were then and my skills, and really got me on a path that was really productive for me. So yeah, I think I've seen it more in individuals rather than services. As far as which ones could, absolutely everything. I can't think of any job where having a trauma-informed approach wouldn't be beneficial. Everything from, I mean, even shopping centre security guards, football game attendants, anything, anywhere where you're going to be dealing with people, and a lot of people, because there's so many people that have past experience of lived experience of trauma, and a lot of people don't talk about it. It's something that will come out more in their behaviours and their attitudes rather than in their words, especially if it was complex trauma. Rarely they'll talk about it. So I think it's really important. Yeah, I think it could be really important for absolutely everyone. If I was to point out three, I would probably say housing is very important. I struggled very great deal with housing, employment, and definitely health. GP surgeries, I think, could really. I think it was more than a year when I came here that I actually got with a GP. So I think that could have a really big impact there as well. Just that you don't need to be a professional to make it work. I think there's all levels of understanding, and a lot of the people that I've met that have really had a great impact on my journey to recovery have been those that had no formal training or understanding, that just had the empathy and the approach and just the basic understanding and then applying it in a responsible way. I think, yeah, I don't think you need to be a professional to do it, but I think everyone can do it.